This is Karl Stefanovic. We recently elected him the King of Australia. This is his current co-host, and they're talking with their money expert about something pretty close to my heart, Pokemon cards. And you know, once the mainstream media picks up on something, it's probably a little bit too late and it's no longer cool, but it is actually really interesting because they're talking about Pokemon cards as an alternate asset class and how they've outperformed other things like Nvidia stocks and the ASX recently. And you've got to listen to this because like her disgust at the concept of collectibles being an investment is just chef's kiss. So nice. Let's listen.
If you're looking for a good investment, don't worry about gold or crypto.
I was just looking at a good investment, and that investment is Pokémon cards with money expert Joel Gibson. I know, Joel, good morning to you.
Hi, Joel.
Tell us all about it.
Look, we're hearing about, gold and Nvidia being great investments at the moment, but it's Pokemon card collectors who are laughing all the way to the bank, and that's because Pokemon cards have massively outperformed just about every other investment class over the past sort of 20 years.
And they're not wrong, particularly with the Strait of Hormuz being closed. You'll notice that even when gold dipped, even when Bitcoin dipped, even when the stock market had its downs, Pokemon cards and vintage just kept going up. Interesting. But why is that, expert?
And it's being driven, just ask Logan Paul, for example. You might remember a couple of years ago, Logan Paul was on the show. There was a mob of thousands of people in the street outside. Well, he recently broke the record for a Pokemon card, selling one card, a Pikachu card, for $16.5 million US dollars.
Wow. What?
So that's the sort of upper limit of what people are paying
No, what? Who's buying that?
for these cards. But if you look at the graph over time, since 20 years ago when they first hit the market, Pokemon cards are worth around 4,000%
Listen to the disgust noises that she's about to make. It's incredible.
more than they were when they were first launched.
If you'd
If you'd invested in Facebook and
That's just ridiculous.
Instagram, you wouldn't have made as much as you would have out of Pokemon cards.
Why? Why?
Well, it's interesting. There's a combination of factors is the theory. One is that they've been around for 20 years and they've had a series of different popularity sort of peaks. Obviously, initially when the cards came out, they were collectible for kids. Those kids are now millennials and they're cashed up, people like Logan Paul, with millions of dollars to spend on the best of the best. But also in, 26.
You can just hear her sighing in the background the entire time. I don't know what Pokemon has done to her, but she does a pivot and gets on board in just a minute. But King Karl was right. He's onto something. He's onto a good investment. And Karl, you should really invest in some Pokemon cards. Some classic vintage graded plays will help you.
Had the Pokemon Go craze. So it had a sort of a new lease of life. And then during the pandemic, collecting just absolutely took off because people were stuck at home looking for things to do.
And all these things are true, but what's really interesting is how, even with the recent excitement, how cards have just been so resilient, and specifically some vintage graded cards are really, really popping off. If you look up any Aquapolis or Skyridge and PSA 10s, they've reached new all-time highs, and there is actually shifting in that low population, extremely high-end vintage market. In fact, anything that's in a PSA 10 that is first edition, and even extending down to 9s and even 8s in some circumstances for some rarer sets, has absolutely been cooking recently. You just can't make a bad investment, and there is some serious money entering this game. Pokemon will probably fall, it's all a fad, it's all a kid's game, blah, blah, blah. But it is undeniable that there's a ridiculous amount of capital that's just been pouring into Pokemon in the last 6 months. And in the context of like this 5-year bull run, that sounds like a ridiculous thing to say. But just have a look at anything. Have a look at this first edition. So this is just a non-holo Pikachu card. There's nothing exciting about it. If you jump on Collector, ungraded, it's a $10 card, $10 US, and it's up to a $22, $23 US card. In a PSA 10 over 12 months in first ed, 12 months ago, you could have picked up for $300 US. Today, there's a huge volume of sales going back to, well, even in February, 722, 800, 800, 800, 900, 900, and now it's consistently over $900 US for a non-holo PSA 10. And I think it's about population 3,000 or so. So it's rare, but it's not crazy rare. These vintage PSA 10s are just going off. People are pouring money into them. They're becoming a viable asset class for people to park money into. There's all the stories, if you know anything about like Watch World, about people wanting to shift money in and out of countries by wearing it on their hands. You can now do that with a slab relatively easily as well. It's just a little bit of cardboard that has a fair amount of value. And when this much big money pours in, if you're lucky enough to have first ed, like if you had the Jolteon, but the chase cards from Jungle, we're just sticking with Jungle at the moment. If you have that in a PSA 10, look at this over the course of a year in first ed. $4,000, and they've sold recently for 8,800. So that's 8,000 US dollars. And 12 months ago, they were 4,000. It's just outperforming everything. Vintage is on an absolute tear. I will say though, mainstream coverage tends to come really late. So by the time something shows up on morning television in Australia, even if it is King Karl of the Karl Stefanovic podcast fame, the story has probably already been playing out for a while. But there's another layer. They're reporting on the previous wave of hype, but there's a whole new wave of hype for this vintage. It's absurd. Pokemon doesn't look like a serious market on its surface, but over and over again, for decades, it's been showing itself to be a relatively serious market. In the world of collecting, of course. It's almost like it needs permission to be taken seriously, and it just doesn't really get it. You just hear those offhanded, sighing comments from the co-host. She's actually really funny. She's a good co-host. Pokemon just always acts like it needs permission to be taken seriously, but the cards haven't changed. The perception's changed a bit, and now people are just pouring money into this side of the hobby.